that's a good question. I think I'd have to look it up to be sure. But I think some commissions will bring in more experienced guys. They'll hire people, like, especially with referees. You see that there's referees like Herb Dean, who's like super experienced, and you know, you get like Yves Levine, it's also super experienced. Dan Mergliotta, super experienced. And you get these guys, you'll see them all over the place. They'll
I saw you ask Herb Dean after the Eddie Alvarez, and I don't know if we heard the answer. What did he say?
Well, first of all, Herb is like one of the most reasonable and logical guys you'll ever talk to after a fight like that. He's not emotional at all. And it's one of the reasons why I think he's like the gold standard. It's him and Big John McCarthy, in my eyes, who are the best of the best. And, you know, not that there's anything wrong with the other people. There's a lot of great referees. I think Dan Mergliotta does a great job, too. But Herb is so, like, calm in there. He just makes good decisions. And he is not a big fan at all of guys playing that game of touching the hand down the ground and avoiding the knee. He thinks it's bullshit. And he thinks if you get hit when you're playing that game, he's going to let it go. He's like, it's too much of a scrap. Like Eddie Alvarez was saying, this is a fist fight. And he's just trying to win. And he's pulling triggers, and they're in questionable moments, and the referee's not stopping him. He's not saying he's down, the fighter's down. Like, you can't even see sometimes. If you're holding on to a guy, or you're in a situation where you're just a few inches from him, you're not sure whether or not his hand is touching the ground, but you are sure you could fucking knee him in the head. Right. A lot of times you're just going to go for that knee to the head. You're going to take that chance. And I think that's what Eddie said, and I think Dustin believed him too, because, you know, Dustin stood up for him in the post-fight interview. He was like, don't you boo this man. It's like, he's the guy who got hit with the illegal shot, and he was still saying, don't boo this guy. Right. So, you know, I asked Herb after the fight, I said, what did you think? I go, these are the old rules, right? So if it's the old rules and one hand's down, then it's illegal, right? He goes, yes. He goes, but I don't feel like it was bearing weight. He goes, you know, he's definitely playing the game, and he definitely was putting his hands down, but I felt like the first time it wasn't bearing weight, and that's how I define it. And he's like, and then the second time, it was a legit mistake. The second time was definitely illegal. But I felt like he was in the middle of throwing it when it all happened. And I think he's correct in that. So he's the guy that's closest to the action, and he's got to make like the most pertinent decision. I also think there's going to be a weird issue with referees that do events that have the new rules and then do events that have the old rules. And it's pretty much universally agreed that the new rules are the way to go. So with the touching of the hands on the mat, it's going to be interesting to see if there's like an interpretation that favors the way the new rules perceive it versus the old rules, because that's how Herb kind of refereed that fight. He went with the sort of the feeling of the new rules, like what people want out of the new rules, but still within the confines, he believes, and he knows it better than me, of the old rules.
Why weren't the new rules adopted for Texas last night?
I don't know. You know, I mean, I think it's probably different with each organization. They have to make decisions, and they decide themselves whether or not they have. I mean, it might be a budget issue. Maybe they don't have time to review it. I don't know. It might be they disagree. Yeah, who knows, man? It's, you know, these athletic commissions can make their own decisions when it comes to that, but as far as like the good of the sport, it would be nice if we all agreed. And I don't think the real concern would be whether or not it's bad for the safety of the fighter. I don't think it is, because I think it encourages fighting more than it encourages stall techniques. So if you give someone a stall technique, like the ability to put your hands on the ground, you won't get kneed in the face, you're going to take it. Some guys are, in some situations. It's going to be a desperado move that if it's there, you're going to reach for it. But if it's not there, you won't reach for it. So, like, in terms of, like, the actual effectiveness of overall fighting and, like, the realism of fighting, it's better to get it out. We don't want it in there. Because I don't think it really does protect people. I think the people that are going to get kneed are going to get kneed. Yeah. I think what it does is it protects you for that brief moment, but in the decision that you make to do that, like, you're making a purely defensive decision. You're putting your hands on the mat, both of them, so this guy can't knee you in the face. That's like not a good sign in a fight. Right. You know, you're in a bad position. And sometimes you can rebound from a bad position, no doubt about it. But I don't think we should I don't think you should have these escape routes where someone can touch the mat and not be able to it's like, I'm on base, right. I'm safe, you know. So I think Herb was right, ultimately. But according to the strict interpretation of the rules, it was an illegal blow. So it was interesting that he made it a no contest.
He can sort of get away with that. He sort of has leeway, right?
Well, it's it's open to interpretation. I guarantee you, I haven't read anything online, but I guarantee you it'll be controversial. I mean, it's just a hot button subject, and people will be debating it back and forth. And there's going to be people that agree with Herb. There's going to be people that disagree with him. But ultimately, that's the toughest job next to being a fighter in MMA. The guy who has to make those calls, and I give them a shit ton of respect, man.
I used to be a baseball umpire, like for Little League, and that was hard. And like to think, like, man, so much passion.
Yeah.
And if it's like a tie, and if I go safe, this side goes crazy, but if I go out, that side goes crazy, and it's so close. And to think that those guys have to make those decisions with dudes' healths and lives, and that those are fathers and children and brothers and sisters and everything, and like that's a crazy gig, man.
Yeah.
Knowing how many punches and whether the person's just sort of seems like they're out of it or if they're still defending themselves.
Yeah.
And their whole livelihood. It's a crazy job.
Yeah, it is a crazy job, man. It's and you have to know a lot about MMA. And you have to really understand when a guy's actually in trouble, when you need to step in, you know. You have to have seen a bunch of guys get hit. You got to know when a guy's done. And it's subjective, and you can make bad calls, and sometimes you make bad calls, and there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, in the early days, Big John McCarthy was refereeing a fight between Matt Lindland and Murillo Bustamante, and Murillo Bustamante tapped Matt Lindland, and then Lindland said that he didn't tap. So they restarted the fight, and they went back at it again, and then Bustamante tapped him again in a later round. Wow. So he tapped him twice in the same fight.
When it happened, you were commentating?
I believe so.
And like, did you see him tap on the video? Do you remember?
I'm trying to remember if I was commentating. It's hard to remember. It's like they all get blurry after a while. I'm pretty sure I was, but man, I might not have been now that I think about it. I'll have to go back and listen. But I remember the fight clearly, because I remember going, oh no, he stood him up, and now they're going to make him fight again? I'm like, that's crazy. He already won, though. He won. Like, all you have to do is look at the replay, and you can see Lindland tap. And he said, look, if they give him another chance to fight, he's going to take another chance to fight. If he can con his way back into a fight, he's going to do it. So he said, I didn't tap. Let him go back in there again.
That's a baller move.
It's such a baller move.
I didn't tap. I was just moving my hand back and forth.
Well, the more baller move is Bustamante tapping him again.
Yeah.
He's there, go, really? And then he caught him with the guillotine the second time. But that's happened before. That's happened in fights before where guys said they didn't tap when they did. And so because of that, people have been forced to like hold submissions and and wait till the referee like literally separates them. But that's also what got people are super sensitive about that with knee bars. But like with chokes, it doesn't seem to bother people as much. Like people don't get mad if somebody holds on to a choke.
Speaking of knees, another thing I thought was really cool from last night was the other female fight, and the lady's kicks from her back.
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievably effective.
Courtney Casey.
Yeah, right on the kneecap, trying to hyperextend those legs, and just even from our angle, it looked like it was really working. You could see her leg bending back, and she didn't want to fuck with that after a while.
No.
In the beginning, the crowd was going crazy because the bigger girl dragged her to the middle of the ring by her foot, and you know what I mean? It got the crowd into it. But as the fight went on, she was beating the shit out of her from her back with her feet. It was very, very, very awesome. Again, like, I wish I knew what you guys were talking about over there, because over there, I'm like, it's interesting. Because you're sort of watching the fight in arena, you're sort of like on an island by yourself when you don't have the headset on, you can't hear you guys.
Right.
But man.
And you're only watching it right in front of you too. You're not really seeing it on the monitors very much.
Right, exactly. So it's all very like.
That's a good question. I think I'd have to look it up to be sure. But I think some commissions will bring in more experienced guys. They'll hire people like. Especially with referees, you see that there's referees like Herb Dean, who's like super experienced, and you get like Yves Levine, it's also super experienced. Dan Bergliata, super experienced, and you get these guys. You'll see them all over the place.
I saw you ask Herb Dean after the Eddie Alvarez, and I don't know if we heard the answer? What did he say?
Well, Herb,
to you?
first of all, Herb is like one of the most reasonable and logical guys you'll ever talk to after a fight like